All right, so get this.
A listener wrote in asking us to take a deep dive into the world of HaremLit.
Yeah.
Specifically, Aether's revival.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Book 9, Empire's Orders, just came out.
I have heard of this, yes.
And apparently, the internet is going bonkers for this thing.
I believe it.
And we're better to find out what's really going on than Reddit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's where we're headed today.
Sounds fun.
So yeah, Aether's revival, for anyone who's never heard of it,
Right.
this series is like the ultimate power fantasy.
I was going to say it's like the epitome of that.
Yeah, like we're talking about Gregory, this mage who's basically like the chosen one.
Yeah.
Right? Super powerful magic. He's got this growing group of companions, a lot of whom happen to be, powerful women.
Wink,
Right.
wink. I was going to say it's giving harem.
Yeah,
Right.
he's giving HaremLit.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, it really leans into a lot of those tropes of the genre,
Yeah.
especially that slow burn kind of romance.
Yeah, what is that? I've seen that term batted around.
Yeah, so basically, instead of rushing into, the physical stuff,
Right.
the story takes its time to develop the emotional connection and build that anticipation.
Okay.
So it's less about the destination and more about the journey,
Okay, that makes sense.
And it looks like that's a big part of the appeal for a lot of fans.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Reddit thread, there are tons of comments praising the series for its relationship building. And this one user, Indigo White, even put together this whole summary of Book 9,
Whoa.
highlighting how Gregory's relationships are really explored in this installment.
So they actually get somewhere.
Yeah, apparently there are like multiple marriage ceremonies,
Oh, wow.
but it's not all smooth sailing.
Hmm.
Of course, there's always a twist, right?
Had to be.
This time it's this new character, Ragnar.
Oh, really? Who's Ragnar?
Nobody knows yet. He's a total mystery.
Oh, I see. So they're leaving us in suspense.
Exactly. And that seems to be a running theme throughout this whole book.
Interesting.
Like, there's this one user, Throwaway P850, who's calling out what they're saying is like a premature power reveal.
What does that mean?
Well, it's basically when an author kind of reveals the protagonist's full potential or gives them like a huge power boost much earlier than expected.
Oh, I see. Like instead of them earning it gradually.
Exactly. And in this case, it seems like Gregory might be leveling up a bit too quickly for some readers' liking.
Oh, I see. That's interesting because sometimes that can feel a little unearned.
Right. And I think that's what's throwing some people off.
Yeah.
Because it can really change the whole power dynamic of the story.
Okay, so they're saying it kind of came out of nowhere.
Pretty much. And it's making people wonder where the story can even go from here.
Wow. So that's a pretty big deal. Guess we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and it's not just the power dynamics that have people talking either. It seems like the pacing of this installment is a bit of a sticking point too.
Really?
Yeah, like this one user, Huckleberry Finn, they're saying that the whole foresight thing is really slowing down the plot.
Foresight, you mean like Gregory being able to see glimpses of the future?
Exactly. And I can kind of see where they're coming from because if you already have an idea of what's going to happen, where's the suspense, right?
Right? Yeah, that makes sense. But then again, maybe it's all about how the author uses it.
That's true. Pacing is such a subjective thing.
That's very true.
What one reader might find tedious, another reader might find totally engrossing.
Yeah, it's all about finding that right balance, I guess.
Absolutely. And in a genre like this where relationships are so central, sometimes those slower moments are really important for character development and intimacy.
Okay, that's true.
So yeah, it's all about finding that sweet spot between action and those quieter character-driven moments.
I hear you. And speaking of finding a balance, there's another topic that came up in the thread that's a little spicier.
Oh.
Yeah. It seems like some readers are wondering if the series is maybe shifting toward a more fade-to-black approach to romance.
Fade to black, huh?
Like implying the romantic or intimate scenes without actually describing them explicitly.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. And I got to admit, I'm curious about this too because it seems like there's a whole spectrum when it comes to romance in HaremLit.
Oh, absolutely. Some authors really go all out with the details while others keep it more suggestive.
Exactly. And this whole fade to black thing is really interesting because it suggests that there is a certain expectation within the genre.
Yeah, like there's almost a debate about what constitutes a satisfying reading experience.
Right, because I'm sure some readers prefer to have those scenes left to their imagination.
Right, let those blanks be filled in by their own minds.
Exactly, and then there are others who are like, hey, I want to experience it all. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, it's all about preference in the end.
For sure.
And it really makes you think about what readers are ultimately looking for in the genre.
Yeah, like what's the main draw? Is it the romantic relationships? Is it the power fantasy? Is it the community aspect?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of everything, right?
Right, right. And speaking of community, we keep coming back to the relationships in this series. And one user, Admirable Drink 9463, specifically asked if the series is still as repetitive with its training arcs, even in this ninth book.
Oh, interesting. Training arcs. Those are a classic in fantasy.
Yeah, it's like that whole leveling up trope you see in video games, but like way more immersive.
Exactly. You're following the protagonist every step of the way as they push their limits and master new abilities.
Right. It's a great way to really connect with the character and understand their journey.
Absolutely. And in HaremLit, those training arcs often become really intertwined with their relationships, too. Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. The bonds that the protagonist forms with their companions
Hmm.
are often forged through those shared experiences,
Hmm.
the mutual support, the encouragement they provide each other.
That makes sense.
It's like the training itself becomes another layer of intimacy,
Mm.
a way to really deepen their connection.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it adds a whole other dimension to those relationships.
That's really interesting.
And it seems like that's resonating with the fans of Aether's revival, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, from what I'm seeing in this Reddit thread, it's not just about the power progression, it's about the emotional growth,
Mm.
the connection between Gregory and his.
Harem.
Right. And it's clear that this series has really struck a chord with people. I mean, you've got users like Soundscape7 who are just counting down the days until the book's release.
Oh, wow, they're hooked.
Totally. And it just goes to show you the power of fandom and community, especially for a niche genre like HaremLit.
Yeah, it's like finding your people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A place where you can geek out over slow burn romances and detailed training arcs without judgment.
I love that.
And what I find really cool is that the discussions within these communities can get surprisingly deep.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People are analyzing the story, speculating about future plot lines. They're even disagreeing with the author's choices.
Wow, so they're really invested.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And it's all done in this spirit of shared passion, which I think is awesome.
That is really cool. And, it's things like that that make me love these deep dives.
Me too.
Because we get to explore the heart of a fandom like this.
Yeah.
Uncover what makes these stories so captivating and maybe even find some new books to add to our own reading lists.
Exactly. It's all about sharing that love of storytelling.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into Aether's revival and see what other burning questions the fans have.
Sounds good.
So before the break, we were talking about how Aether's revival has got fans buzzing about all sorts of things.
Yeah, it seems like there's something for everyone.
Right, exactly. And one thing we touched on was this idea of the series maybe taking a more fade-to-black approach to the romance.
Right, like implying those intimate scenes without getting too explicit.
Exactly, and I'm seeing a real mix of reactions to that online.
Yeah, some readers seem to be totally on board with it.
Which makes sense, right?
Right.
I mean, letting your imagination fill in the blanks can sometimes be even more powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can really add to the mystery and the intrigue.
For sure. But then on the other hand, you have those readers who are like, hey, I'm here for the,
Juicy details.
Exactly. And, I can see that side of it too.
Oh, definitely. It's all about personal preference.
Right. And I guess it really depends on what you're looking for in a story.
Exactly. And I think this whole fade to black thing really highlights that tension that exists in HaremLit sometimes.
How so?
Well, you've got this genre that's often associated with, a certain level of explicit content,
Right.
but then you also have these really strong emotional connections and character arcs that are just as important.
Totally. So it's like finding that balance between the two.
Precisely. And what one reader might find satisfying, another reader might find lacking.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
It's all subjective.
It really is. And you know what else I find interesting?
What's that?
This whole conversation about fade to black, it kind of ties into something else we were discussing earlier.
You mean the pacing?
Yes, exactly. Because if you think about it, fade to black is kind of like a form of pacing in itself.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right. Like it's about choosing which details to linger on and which ones to kind of gloss over.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
And it makes me think that maybe pacing is even more important in HaremLit than in other genres.
How so?
Well, because you're dealing with multiple relationships at once.
Right.
So you have to find a way to give each one enough space to breathe without overwhelming the reader.
That's a really good point.
And I think that's why you see so much discussion online about whether a series is too fast-paced or too slow-paced.
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly that perfect rhythm that keeps you hooked without feeling rushed or bogged down.
Absolutely. And when an author nails it, it's magical.
It really is. But you know what else can be magical?
What's that?
Training arcs.
Oh, yeah. Those are always fun.
I love a good training arc, especially in fantasy.
Me too. It's like watching a character level up in real time.
Exactly. And in Aether's revival, it seems like those training arcs are about so much more than just physical strength.
Oh, absolutely. They're
Well,
about pushing boundaries both physically and emotionally.
right, and I think that's what makes them so compelling to read.
And don't forget about the relationship building that happens during those training
Oh
arcs.
yeah, that's a huge part of it.
Like you were saying earlier, those shared experiences really forge a strong bond between the characters.
Exactly. It's like they're going through this intense journey together.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful to read about.
It really can. And it's moments like that that make me realize how much thought and care goes into writing a good HaremLit series.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about throwing a bunch of characters together and calling it a day.
Right. There has to be a real depth to the relationships and the characters themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that Aether's Revival does really well.
I agree. And it's clear that the fans agree too, because they are passionate about this series.
Oh, yeah. They are totally invested in these characters and their stories.
Which is amazing to see. And, it makes me wonder,
What's that?
what is it about HaremLit that inspires such a dedicated following?
That's a great question, and I think there are a lot of answers.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, I think HaremLit offers a really unique blend of fantasy, adventure, and romance.
Okay, I can see that.
You get the excitement of exploring new worlds and battling epic foes, but you also get these really intimate and heartwarming relationships.
Right, it's like the best of both worlds.
Exactly, and I think that appeals to a lot of readers.
Me included. And
Yeah.
you know what else I love about HaremLit?
What's that?
The sense of community.
Oh, absolutely. The fandoms for these series are incredible.
They're so passionate and supportive.
Exactly, and I think that's because HaremLit often explores themes of family and belonging.
That's so true. And I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially in today's world, where it feels like those connections are more important than ever.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what else I find fascinating about HaremLit?
What's that?
The way it challenges traditional power dynamics.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. In a lot of fantasy stories, the protagonist is this lone wolf figure who saves the day on their own.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
But in HaremLit, the protagonist's strength comes from their relationships with others.
Right, they're not afraid to rely on their companions for help and support.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really refreshing change of pace.
It is, and it's something that I think a lot of readers can relate to.
Absolutely, because let's face it, none of us can do it all on our own.
So true, we all need a little help from our friends.
Exactly. And I think that's a really beautiful message at the heart of a lot of HaremLit stories.
I love that. And you know what else I love about this genre?
What's that?
It's always evolving.
Oh, absolutely. It's not afraid to try new things and push boundaries.
Exactly, and I think that's what keeps it so fresh and exciting.
I couldn't agree more, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for HaremLit.
Me neither. But in the meantime, I think we should probably take another quick break.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive back into the world of Aether's revival.
Sounds good.
Now, before the break, we were talking about what makes HaremLit so captivating.
Oh, yeah. It's a really fascinating genre.
And one thing that really stood out to me from the Reddit thread was the sense of community.
Absolutely. The fans of Aether's Revival are seriously dedicated.
They are. And you know what else is cool? They're not just along for the ride. They're really engaged with the story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're analyzing every detail, speculating about what's going to happen next.
Exactly. Like, remember that whole discussion about Fade to Black?
Oh, yeah. Good point. That sparked some serious debate.
Right. And it just goes to show how much these readers care about the characters and the relationships.
Totally. And they're not afraid to voice their opinions either.
Exactly. They're invested.
Absolutely. And that passion is really contagious. I mean, even I'm getting excited about this series now.
Me too. And at the end of the day, isn't that what makes a good book great? When it sparks those kinds of conversations and connections.
100%. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Sharing those stories and getting lost in those worlds together.
Exactly. It's about finding your people, the ones who get it, who appreciate those same things you do.
And I think that's something really special about the HaremLit community.
I agree. They've really created this welcoming space where people can geek out over these stories without judgment. It is. And, that's something I really appreciate about these deep dives.
Me too.
It's not just about dissecting a book. It's about celebrating the things we love and the communities that form around them.
It's about understanding what makes those stories tick and why they resonate with us so deeply.
Exactly. And, whether you're a diehard HaremLit fan or just curious about the genre, I think there's something really special about Aether's revival.
I'd have to agree. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire some of our listeners to check it out for themselves.
I hope so. And if you do, be sure to let us know what you think. We always love hearing from you. But until next time, happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.